Hey y'all, Zelda here. I am here with a week ahead Pick a Skull tarot reading. I have three different crystal skulls, and you are going to pick the one that speaks to you, that feels like it is calling out to you in some way. And then you'll go to the description for this video and you'll find the timestamps for the three different piles, and you can skip ahead to watch the pile that you chose. So before I introduce the different skulls, I'm going to tell you about the three different decks that I am going to be using today. Each pile is going to have three cards in it. One from the Universal Dragons Oracle, one from the Prairie Majesty Oracle, and one from the Luminous Void Tarot. So each of the piles is going to have a card from each of those decks, and I will also have those decks listed in the descriptions. So let's jump into the skulls. So pile number one is going to be this citrine star being skull carved by Leandro de Souza. This is Romeo. So if Romeo is speaking to you, that is pile number one. Pile number two is this calcite skull, unknown master carver. Their name is Honeybee. So if Honeybee is speaking to you, this is pile number two. Pile number three is this Lemurian quartz skull carved by Leandro de Souza. Her name is Cosmona. So if Cosmona is speaking to you, that is pile number three. Before we jump ahead, I am going to spritz something to transition. I'm going to use one of my aura mists. I like using the Golden Sphinx before I do channeled readings because it helps me connect to the Akashic Records and that type of wisdom through the Sphinx energy. If you would like to light a candle or do something or sit as I call in guides, then you are welcome to. If not, all of the timestamps will be in the bio or in the description. Calling all of your energy and attention back to you now. Inviting your awareness to this present moment. I call upon my guides, ancestors, spirit teams, and lineages to support me in delivering messages from the spirits that are here today. And I call upon the guides, ancestors, spirit teams, and lineages of each and every person watching this video to support them in receiving the messages that are meant for them and utilizing their sacred powers of discernment to know which messages they may leave behind. Okay, so let's begin with group one. Group one, you chose Romeo. Romeo is really so much more beautiful than you can see, as all of these skulls are, than you can see on camera, especially the webcam that I have. Romeo is a saber-toothed tiger spirit and is a dream walker and can move around astral plane and between dimensions. So let's see what cards we chose today. The tarot card today is the Hanged Woman. I refer to this card as the chrysalis. The oracle, the universal dragon oracle, is creation. And the Prairie Majesty oracle is the mallard. The word is dabble. And the question is, what would help me feel safe in opening up? So the messages that I'm getting about these cards first feel like they are connected to this quality of the suspension of time and the mind that happens in the creative process. The chrysalis is such a fundamental part of the creative process. It almost looks like an inverted posture to me, just like the way that they are together. And it feels like this energy of being contained and needing to surrender to the time that it is taking to create. There feels like some energy, particularly because this is Romeo's pile. There feels like this energy of like trusting in timing and in like opening to receiving with less force or effort, with not knowing how things are going to turn out. When I see like what would help me feel safe in opening up, I get this sense of like, is there something unsafe about feeling in between, right? Like this dream walker space is like the ability to move between one world and the next and be, it's almost like inhabiting, rather than going through the veil, it's like having one foot on either side of the veil. And this suspension can be challenging. The chrysalis is not easy. It's like a complete like deconstruction and being present with process and having your attention and focus there. And with the creative process, there's a lot of breaking down and building back up that happens. I think of like the incubation period, even for like the gestational period of any animal. Like it's not just like something happens and then like new life springs into creation. It's like bones have to be built and teeth and hair and skin, organs need to be grown. These things take time. And that is true for every creative project and every creative process that you go through, whether that is a relational creative process, whether that is a personal growth creative process, or whether that is, indeed, this makes me feel like it is related to the actual creation of something, or something creative oriented, like a creative project, or even just like a goal or a dream, because it feels like that creation card is like holding the whole conversation. Dabble feels like an interesting word in contrast too, because it um, reminds me of like the healing quality of play, and of like doing something until you no longer want to. And that feels like part of the divine timing is like trusting your attention and your connection to something. So the message that I'm hearing from Romeo is around, like, in order to be able to walk through the dimensions or move around the astral plane, there needs to be sufficient trust in oneself, because there is an exchange that is created implicitly. Showing me this like moment where you like walk through a portal, almost, where you have to like, where you're like in between and have a foot in both worlds, and you need to be able to accurately like envision and call in the other world. Like you have to almost like trust who you're following, or know where you're going, like that kind of feeling, or trusting in a sense of intuition and in that like inner compass almost. And so dabbling and experimenting is also a process of learning, and learning what works for you and how you can better trust yourself. So this like question of what would help me feel safe in opening up feels like the ask to like surrender and yield into the process of the chrysalis, into being broken down and rebuilt in the time that it takes to grow. I'm hearing the words like trust, inspiration, that like one of the uh hanging out, like there is some like playfulness almost in this, where there's like this dangling quality, and this like tilt of the head, and this just feels like they're like receiving, almost like channeling. And I'm seeing even like the rays of light there. And trust inspiration is what I'm hearing, and like connecting through all of that, trusting the way that spirit, inspiration feels like bringing spirit in and like receiving from spirit in a creative context. And so there feels like this relationship, or this dance, and that trusting inspiration feels like hearing and being moved actually in the process of creation. And that when you trust fully and deeply in that, there's no sense of impatience. And that doesn't mean you won't feel impatient. It's just an acknowledgement that impatience is like a snag or a resistance to being in the flow with that there's doubt that's being seeded in moments of impatience, or moments where you aren't fully present or are wishing for something different. And so it does feel like this kind of like how to work with safety, right? And surrendering to the present moment as a way to be okay with like the arc of your process. And like the other thing that I'm seeing is someone doing like the dabbling feels like if you're feeling stuck, how can you go where you're not stuck, right? If you're feeling stuck with a project, how can you go somewhere else and see where energy is actually moving, or sit with that, or go for a walk, or meditate with it, or do some journaling, like where is the movement happening? How can you feel safe opening up to the stickiness of the situation so that you can actually be there fully, and so that you can be open to inspiration and trust it when you receive it. Okay. Thank you, Group 1. I think that is your message for today. As always, I am super grateful to have you here. If you would like to be notified when I put videos out, you can subscribe. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you around or seeing you next week for the week ahead. Group 2. Let's see what cards Honeybee selected for you. You chose Honeybee. It was actually one of my earlier skulls. They have such good energy. Let's see. Growth is your Universal Dragon Oracle. The tarot card from the Luminous Void is the Four of Swords. And then the Grasshopper says jump and asks, where am I ready to leap forward? Where am I ready to leap forward? So the Four of Swords feels like this invitation to create a container for the mind to be with itself, with yourself, for you to be with yourself. And this feels like I really resonate with the teachings of Lindsay Mack around the fours and how they create this like container for a process. And with the Four of Swords, there feels like this containment or reflective space of opening to what is going on. And it feels like in the context of here that there is, with growth and that where am I ready to leap forward, that maybe there is like a lot of moving pieces or a lot of like potential that could come through, but that there's maybe like also a lot of like static is just like, that's just what's coming to mind. But you can kind of translate that if possible for yourself. But it's just like this noise kind of that feels like I actually feel kind of like prickly and that it's a little distracting. That's like the sensation that I'm having. And so with that kind of extra input, it feels like the Four of Swords is inviting like the buffering out of that, like putting on some noise canceling headphones that like blocks that out to be really present with yourself. And this feeling of like growth, I'm just noticing that none of these cards have other beings present. Like feel like there's just one being there, right? There's a grasshopper there. There's one person there with the swords. And it just feels like this invitation to connect deeply with yourself and to create space for the practices of reflection and to ask yourself in the context of growth and of development, where are you ready to move forward, to leap forward? And the question is not like, where do I want to go next? The question is, where am I ready to leap forward? And that involves being really honest with yourself and being really aware of like, what things are you still developing? Where are you actually feeling prepared to feel stable enough to make that leap? So Honeybee is saying like, in the dance, in the dance of a hive, with all the hustle and bustle, that there is value in the individual work and that there is value in the collective work and that they are actually interconnected, that those things are interconnected and I see them like fitting together. And so there's this aspect of like being present with oneself and growing is growing into what is needed in a collective sense, but also utilizing the tools and the capacity on an individual sense. And that these two are like, I see them like just fitting together in this way, that there's not like, it's not that they are mirrors, like they're not the same, and in some ways they are perhaps, but they're also just like so complementary or something. Like it feels like opposite ends of the color wheel that like all are interconnected through the wheel. Honeybee also is saying that the Four of Swords doesn't have to be time like fully alone either. Like in every container for reflection, there are supportive people that hold that. And so this could also be time with like someone that you trust a lot, or a group, or a forum, or um, processor like a therapist or a coach, someone who really is like an ally in supporting that container, or even could be like reading a book um, by someone that feels inspiring to your growth. It feels very much like you don't have to do it alone, but you do need to have um, your own core as being like solid. Honeybee is showing me this like waggle dance of the bee where bees will dance the location of something to communicate that to other bees. And they will like scout and go out and then dance how the bees can find like the nectar and go collect or go pollinate that. Excuse me if I'm using the incorrect terms, but they're showing me this movement, and there's this aspect of like needing to have the skills and the trust to be able to do that is actually like an act of vulnerability, and like going, it like feels like going out and retrieving something and coming back in like a courageous way, and that this is a way that there is like communication happening, and that there can be like a journey into solitude that then comes back and benefits the whole. I am having a hard, I'm curious if that image lands for you, because I'm also noticing that I'm having a hard time piecing together the different pieces, like I'm being shown imagery. And so I actually wonder, like, if in your reflection process, if exploring bee symbolism feels helpful or supportive to you, that could also be nourishing, because Honeybee has a lot of like imagery to kind of share around this. By containing the mind with the Four of Swords, like by creating a container to address and confront the limitations of the mind and to be quiet in the mind and to be feel safe with the mind, we really get to um, be honest with our trajectory. That's just really feeling like that. Where am I ready to move forward? It feels like being honest with the trajectory that is going to create growth for you in a way that feels exciting, is the word that comes to mind, which I didn't say it right away because I'm not sure, but like it does feel like this level of like rising, almost like a bubbling up of excitement, right? That there can be some excitement around acknowledging the areas where you are ready for growth, and that can still be a challenge. Okay. Thank you, group 2. I think that is your message. I look forward to hearing what you make of it. I hope that it is helpful for you. As always, I'm grateful that you're here. And if you would like to be notified, you can subscribe for future videos. You can also visit my website if you're curious or would like to connect with your own carving or are curious about how we could work together in other ways. But otherwise, I'll see you next week for the week ahead. Group 3. You chose Cosmona. Cosmona is a very like strong and activating presence. She has Syrian connection. Okay, so let's see what cards she chose for you. The tarot card is the Sun. The Universal Dragon card is Balance. And Liberate, the Prairie Smoke. What reminds me I am free? What reminds me I am free? So this feels like with the Sun and this card together, I feel this deep message of like the sun coming and shining light onto a situation, onto an experience, onto a process. And that when that light is shown into the shadows, there can be like a retraction or like a response, a reaction from the system, whether it's othering and saying, oh, I don't like that, right? Whether it's like highlighting the contrast of shadow and light. But with this invitation of balance, it's important to note that when we shine the light in certain areas, that it like, I don't know, it's like if you've ever turned up the contrast really high on a photo filter. Most of us are familiar on some level with photo filtering. But if you turn the contrast up really high, what happens is like the light and the shadows become really, really bright in comparison, but you lose all of this like nuance in between, right? And so when this light comes out, it feels like it can create this really stark contrast, like a binary, like an oppositional binary that is in the revelation of things. But that it feels like with this balance, there's almost like a desire to like pull that scale back and invite like nuance and detail and conversation. That's like feeling like the word is like inviting a conversation between the two extremes or between multiple extremes to avoid the like flattening that happens in contrast. And so that balancing can be like fleshing that back out. And with this sun, I see this full spectrum of experience, right? That like shining the light, but like how can that light be this radiating tenderness and care and being seen? How can like witnessing be a less violent act? How can we see others in a kinder way? And also, in turn, how can we see ourselves in a kinder and more nuanced way that leaves room for conversation and evolution and growth? In particular, this feels like when I see this card of Liberate, this feels like an invitation for someone who is working with shadow. This could be the psychological shadow, but it could also be, I'm getting kind of a yes. So like this might be working with your own shadow, and that is oftentimes what is going on in conversations of collective shadow, things like systemic oppression, like systemic marginalization of groups. This can be like exploring the need for revolution and evolution in certain areas. And in this, there can be a contrast or a view, like a shifting of the perspective or the viewpoint to what needs to be different. And this question of what reminds me that I am free feels like this returning to cosmic order or something, where like becoming more free or stretching into the freedom that you are entitled to is a very natural and aligned thing. Systemic oppression and marginalization and the dehumanization of certain qualities or traits is harmful, and it is also unnatural in the sense that I'm being shown this. So I'm reading this book about Fae and Faerie, sorcery and fairy faith, and they talk about how like hoarding resources or how not being in balance with your resources and the environment is to like create a rupture of the like natural giving and taking that is part of universal order, and that is actually like very it's very disordered on being part of the collective. And so I'm just like being shown that. And so that's feeling like it's informing this, right? Is that, I see this being like with their hands almost like over the earth. And this feels like maybe a voice to our upcoming eclipses of a balance of lightness and dark. We are also at an equinox where we're at this tipping point of balance and light and dark. And as this kind of, balancing act of cycles happens, there feels like this ask to remind yourself how you're free, to liberate yourself in your mind. And this is not to flip-flop from addressing harm to bypassing harm. Cosmona is like very soft in a lot of ways and is very firm about that. And it's like, this is not about like negating this. This is about moving beyond and integrating this into something that is sustainable. We can't we can't liberate ourselves from systems if we cannot liberate ourselves internally. If we cannot shine a light internally and sit with nuance and difference and balance, then we cannot do that in an external sense either. Then our capacity to do that is limited. So feeling and integrating that into your life is going to help you radiate that outward. And if you feel connected to Syrian ancestry, this feels like an invitation to open to that. That your comprehensive ancestry on an energetic level is here to support you in this process. You're not expected to do all of this on your own. Thank goodness. So, yes. I hope that was supportive for you. I think that is your message, Group 3. Thank you, Cosmona and Honeybee and Romeo. And thank you, Group 3. I appreciate you being here. It's always joyful to get to share space with you all on a regular basis. If you would like to be notified when I make more videos, you can subscribe, or you can always check out my website if you would like to connect to your own guide. I'm offering some carvings. Those are available with readings, as well as the other things that I periodically offer. Also, if anyone stuck around this long, besides Group 3, you always get the long endings. I also am having a newsletter that is free to sign up for, that you can sign up for on my website. And I will be sending out some channeled messages, as well as a tarot scope that's going to be going out for each zodiac sign for each season. So I'm really excited to share that with you all. So if you'd like to sign up for that, you can check out the description. Thank you all so much. I'll see you next week.